All right, the link is posted in the chat. Everyone, please get out of here as soon as possible because we are literally approaching room capacity and the actual round participants might not be able to get in. Thank you. I need 25 more people to leave. The stream is better, I promise. You can like pause it, rewind it, slow it down and stuff. It's very nice. YouTube's a very good website. Once again, I need 25 observers to get out of here and onto the YouTube stream. If you do not leave yourselves, I will purge randomly until I get down to 25.
Just as a note, if you are in this room, you need to go ahead and begin to change your name to the proper naming convention. If you do not, you risk being removed from this room. Please go ahead and start to change your name as we wait for the debaters to arrive so that you are not removed from this room. This round is on the live stream. You can watch it from the YouTube link on toc20.tabroom.com.
Please make sure to update your names to make it match your roles. I see a lot of fake judges in here. A couple people with nothing in front of their names. But yeah, appreciate it.
As a reminder, you need to go ahead and change your name to the proper naming convention and what your role is in the room. We will remove you if you do not follow the naming convention.
Socks blown up. I don't know what the expression is, but you know what I mean.
Once again, if you are an observer and you can watch on YouTube, you need to leave and do that. Otherwise, I will purge you. You are not going to stay in this room by just like staying. The numbers are going to get trimmed down, so you might as well go over to YouTube right now.
Morgan, I saw you drop in. Is your partner here?
Sorry, my.
Yeah, I'm looking for your partner so that we can go ahead and lock the room.
Yeah, he's on it, so he'll be here like very momentarily.
All right, and I'm renaming you.
Okay.
All right, I believe everyone who is a participant in the round is here, so I'm going to lock the room. That means if you leave, you will not be able to come back, so don't leave. Unless you're an extra observer, in which case, please leave.
It was like, are you guys down for like sending like the case doc in the email chain before like the speech, or like I guess I can just do that, but
I honestly don't care.
I mean, yeah.
For
Why
me, it's
not?
fine.
Here, have we put our emails in the thing?
yeah, we should do that.
Go ahead and put them in the chat and I'll set the chain up, okay?
All right, thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Does this round have the thing where people do like speeches before their first speech?
Yeah, we're gonna do that. Like,
Oh,
thank you, you mean?
Yeah, thank you speeches.
Yeah, we're gonna do those. Yeah.
That's epic.
Chase, Mike, and Lizzie, we have you down to just the Blake debaters, the Westlake debaters, and their specific observers. Everyone else is on the live stream, so that y'all should get the fastest connection. Truth is going to stay in here to live stream, and if you have any problems, most of y'all have my cell phone number. Just text me. Great. Congratulations. Have a great round.
Miles, are you there? Miles, can you get
Yeah,
on
I'll
the
get on.
Facebook call?
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff.
Okay, it looks like I'm missing one of the debaters. Chase, Lizzie, I'm there. I've got 2 Westlakes. I need a second Blake debater. I got Morgan. Got an email from,
Oh,
Uh,
I am also here.
you need to put your email in, bro.
Oh shoot, I thought you did that. My bad.
I sent
You
it.
got it. Okay.
okay, I just sent the email chain out. Everyone should have it. We'll wait and get everyone to confirm that, and we should be in business.
Cool. I got the email chain as well. If everyone's ready, I will start.
Miles, you have to get the speech thing before.
Oh yeah.
Actually, can you give me one like 2 minutes real quick? Thanks.
Yeah, you're totally good.
And to everyone watching, Westlake is Khan speaking first. So the screen.
Go, Jack. Will you look at your phone, please?
All right, I am ready whenever y'all are.
Okay. So before the speech begins, I'm just gonna give some shout outs to a couple of key people within my debate career. So first of all, my mom and dad, they've been incredibly supportive of me through basically all these tournaments. Like I've always been out of the house because of debate, and they've just been really supportive of me going on these trips. Also, I'd like to thank my debate coach, Joseph Euler, for being a real one and teaching us all the ins and outs of the debate styles that we're not as good at. And I think he's definitely taught us a lot of valuable lessons in terms of that. Also, I would like to teach or thank my team as well for being there, whether it be the people who travel with us to the novice members who are just constantly in support of us. They've always really been real ones. I've also like to thank our consultants, Thomas and MK. They've been really helpful in preparing us for the TOC. And then finally, but most importantly, Jason Luo for being a great partner. So thank you. All right. If anybody's not ready, all right, if anybody is, if everyone's good, I'll start. Cool. We indicate our first contention is Israel. The withdrawal of U.S. forces in the status quo has corresponded with the rise in Israeli tensions. Herald 20 confirms that the rising tensions between Israel and Iran are developing against the backdrop of U.S. withdrawal from the Middle East, making a clash imminent. There are three reasons why affirming would cause an all-out Israeli war. First is emboldening Israel's enemies. Ahrar 19 writes that the American decision to disengage from Israel would embolden Iran and its proxies. Paul continues that U.S. withdrawal would allow Iran to have a freer hand to operate inside Iraq and ultimately in Israel's own frontiers. Second is causing an Israeli panic. Pollock writes that American withdrawal will make Israel feel obliged to increase its forays against terrorists inside Iraq, which would increase the risk of retaliation. Third is allowing for weapon smuggling. Scheinman 11 explains that American forces act as a barrier of smuggling rockets into the West Bank to Hezbollah. Critically, Lapin 19 writes that allowing Hezbollah to acquire more rockets would boost their confidence and thus embolden them to take risks, ultimately culminating into conflict. For these three reasons, Ahrar 20 concludes that should the U.S. withdraw its forces, Israel will find itself in a war. An Israeli war would be devastating, as Mornine finds that if Israel was ever devastated by any kind of war, it would retaliate against any actor, including Russian and European targets that threatened Israel in the past. Russia would respond with nuclear weapons, leading to a global nuclear war that kills billions. Our second contention is Bahrain. The Middle East Policy Council writes that Iran has embarked on a larger game of avoiding direct conflict with Bahrain for now. However, Iran has an incentive to take over Bahrain. Indeed, Altamini of Oxford College writes that the gradual takeover of Bahrain is crucial for Iran to recognize its ambitions of dominating the Persian Gulf. U.S. military presence has been key for preventing an Iranian standoff over Bahrain for two reasons. The first is halting a Shiite uprising. McDaniels 13 of Brookings writes that the United States has helped support Bahrain's Sunni government with its presence. However, McDaniels continues that were the U.S. to remove its forces, the Shia majority would have greater power. Unfortunately, Ronald 13 writes that a power grab by the Shia within Bahrain would cause an Iranization of the area that would quickly spread to Saudi Arabia. The second is deterring Iran's military. McDaniels 13 writes that the absence of a U.S. presence would create a power vacuum and eliminate the moderating effect of U.S. influence in any Bahraini crisis. Altamimi of Oxford continues that the presence of the U.S. Navy off the coast of Bahrain has been critical in preventing an Iranian invasion. Unfortunately, Mandel 17 writes that if Iran takes over Bahrain, they'll use the opportunity to seize Saudi oil fields, escalating tensions in the region. Iranian confrontation would escalate, as Slackman 11 writes that any Iranian confrontation of Bahrain will lead to direct conflict with Saudi Arabia. The Washington Institute in 2011 warns that Bahrain is home to Saudi Arabia's supply of oil, and thus any crisis would quickly escalate into an international issue. France 24 finds in the past proxy wars, they've killed hundreds of thousands of people. Additionally, it could lead to nuke war. As AB 13 writes, an attack on Iran would escalate to a large-scale war. Russia and China would be drawn in with nuclear weapons, and they could be used by miscalculation, ultimately resulting in extinction. Our third contention is Saudi Arabia. Withdrawing from the Middle East would inflame tensions with Saudi Arabia for two key reasons. The first is panic. With our security in the region, Walsh 19 finds that Saudi Arabia has pursued negotiations in Yemen, resulting in easing tensions and drastic reductions in both airstrikes and casualties. Unfortunately, Pollock furthers that because our allies aren't as capable as we are and often over-exaggerate the Iranian threat, when the U.S. disengages from the Middle East, they overreact and worsen the situation when they try to take matters into their own hands. For example, Brands 18 writes that most of Saudi Arabia's wrongdoings like Yemen were motivated by the belief that the U.S. was leaving the Middle East. Stopping the next Yemen is important, as Lynch 19 quantifies that the Yemen war killed 233,000 people by the end of 2019 and would kill nearly 500,000 through 2022. Second is prolif. Saudi prolif is extremely unlikely right now. Kaczynski 13 writes that the American nuclear umbrella has remained preferable for Saudi Arabia over purchasing or pursuing any independent effort to obtain nuclear weapons. Tamini 13 gives the warrant, finding that proliferation attempts in the status quo will betray the U.S. and sacrifice our security that Riyadh desires to maintain. However, if we withdraw our security from the region, Crosby 19 finds that Saudi Arabia will work to obtain their own bomb either by purchasing one directly or paying scientists from another nuclear state to develop their program. Problematically, Edelman furthers that should emerging nuclear powers would not have second strike capabilities, and can be forced to launch preemptive attacks. The authority to launch weapons will be in the hands of low-level commanders, and the risk of an accidental launch will be high. Ultimately, Star 14 concludes that the consequences of even a small nuclear war would cause extinction because it would blow a hole in the ozone layer. Overall, Goldenberg 18 explains that for the past 20 years, whenever the United States left the Middle East and massive problems reappear, they created political outcry that forced us to re-enter the region with even more resources in hopes of containing the problem. Thus, we're proud to negate.
Can I see a few cards?
Yeah.
First, can I see the ARAM evidence? It's link evidence for smuggling. I think I got that right.
Wait, Jack,
What's up?
the whole thing is open source, so we can just send you the whole doc.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Let me go find the. Give me a second. Wait. Okay, so yeah, I'll just hit reply all, and then those are all the cards that we read. Okay.
I set them in cut card format as well, like outside of the doc.
All right, we're good.
Sorry, y'all taking prep?
Oh, I forgot to. My mic was muted. Sorry, it came through. We're good. Morgan, you can go ahead.
Okay, cool.
All right. So I also have some thank yous. So it is such an honor to be here in the TOC finals, and there are so many people that we want to thank. First, we want to thank the TOC committee and the University of Kentucky, especially Dr. J.W. Patterson and Mr. Dave Arnett. You bring the community together for this tournament every year, and it is special every single time. We also want to thank everyone who made the online TOC possible, from the people who worked hard to get the platform ready on short notice, to the teams and judges who participated and kept the debate alive. These times are very hard, but it's people like you who help us make the best out of these circumstances. So given that my career will be over within the next hour, we have many people that we'd like to thank for making the last 4 years possible. First, we want to thank the Blake School, Dr. Ann Stabney, Dr. Ann Graybeal, Joe Ruggiero, Jay Broker. We are all so lucky to have a school that not only supports our program's existence, but shows up on our pre-tournament Zoom call to personally wish us well. It means so much. And additionally, thank you to all the teachers who go out of their ways to help us succeed, even if we miss their Friday classes several times a semester. We also want to thank our parents and siblings. Thank you for supporting us for years of unreasonable red-eye flights and missing weekends at home for tournaments. We could never do this without you. And of course, your financial support. And finally, or next, an enormous thank you to the entire Blake team, current members and alums. Your constant support through the year has kept us motivated. We are more than a team, we are a family. An extra special thank you to everyone who showed up to scout and prep this weekend, sacrificing their free time for the good of the team. You are all amazing, and we couldn't be more proud of the next generation of Blake debate. And then there are the Blake coaches. First and foremost, we want to thank Shane and Sandy. You make Blake debate what it is. You built this public forum squad from the ground up, and you've made it the amazing team that it's become. Thank you to the assistant coaches that have supported us throughout the year. Christian, who we are infinitely grateful isn't actually retiring, Ava, Ellie, Chloe, and Shreya, and another big thank you to all of the friends of Blake debate who pitched in and coached for us this weekend. Next, I'd like to shout out the FMJ lab from camp this summer. It's great. It feels great to close out this this tournament together. You were all a great group of people, and it was really fun. We had a great 2 weeks, and we still stay in contact. Anurag told me to shout out our roast battles. I crushed him in the roast battles, by the way. Anyways, finally, obviously, I'd like to thank Jack. We have been friends and teammates for the last 4 years, and I couldn't think of a better person or best friend to debate my senior year with. This has been a hell of a ride. So sorry that was long, but we can start now. Anyways, I've been waiting for 4 years to say this. For the last time ever, contention 1 is Yemen. Hasbin 19 explains that benefiting from the U.S. security umbrella anchored by its bases around the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the UAE have attempted to organize the region through military interventions. They launched with U.S. support an ineffective war against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. After America withdraws troops from the Gulf, Saudi Arabia no longer has a security umbrella that enables adventurism into Yemen. This will cause them to turn to a negotiated solution to the conflict, as current conditions are ripe for an agreement. Hanley of March 2020 explains that the war has been costly both in financial terms and in international reputation of Saudi Arabia. The Saudis would agree to having the Houthis share in power with Saudi-supported Hadi government. This is true empirically. Parsi 20. Recognizing that the U.S. military was no longer at their disposal, Saudi Arabia began exercising their diplomatic options. Saudi Arabia stepped up direct talks with the Houthi rebels, and the level of violence declined as a result of an 80% reduction in Saudi-led airstrikes. A power-sharing agreement is critical. Wiesman 18. The fighting in the blockade in particular have disrupted imports of food, fuel, and medical supplies, which is why Landry in 2019 concludes that the UN has described Yemen as the world's worst humanitarian emergency with 10 million people on the brink of famine. Contention 2 is nuclear submarines. U.S. military presence in the Strait of Hormuz pushes Iran to develop nuclear subs. O'Connor 2020. The head of Iran's Navy called for nuclear submarines, said that nuclear propulsion would deter and defend against the United States. He concludes that what creates the insecurity in the Gulf is the presence of Americans. They have the capability. Weinthal 20. Nuclear propulsion submarines capability actually exists. Iran notified the IAEA that it was seeking naval nuclear propulsion, and Iran would beg, borrow, or steal technology. No checks on proliferation. So, nuclear subs give Iran plausible deniability. Keck 13. Nuclear submarines will allow Iran to deny ambitions to acquire nuclear weapons. It can take actions that put it remarkably close to a nuclear weapon while maintaining plausible deniability. The impact is accidents. Nuclear subs make accidents inevitable. Mian 19. Nuke subs structural and characteristics pose unavoidable risk of accidents. Submarine nuclear reactors lead to ballistic missiles and warheads. Combination of failures result in devastating consequences that multiplies dramatically. Nuclear accidents could collapse marine biodiversity, which causes extinction. Schofield 14. The oceans are critical to human survival. Nutrient cycling represents a key repository of biological diversity and driving the global atmospheric system. Marine environments support key habitats and living resources. Contention 3 is a U.S.-Iran war. All right, I can slow down a little bit. Aggressive foreign policy has put America and Iran on a collision course. Coronavirus is making war in the Middle East even more likely. Germanos from April. Donald Trump threatened to attack Iran and make the country pay a heavy price. With a global pandemic and an economic collapse, Trump wants to add a major war into the mix. K in 2020 continues. Some in the administration seek to use COVID-19 to capitalize on Iran's increased vulnerability. Withdrawing troops from Iran's backyard reduces the probability of U.S.-Iran war for 2 reasons. The first is provoking Iran. Continued military presence risks miscalculation and provocation of Iran. Abido 20. U.S. fears of an imminent large-scale attack on its soldiers in Iraq is entirely valid. Iran seems ready to do whatever it takes to drive American troops out of the country immediately. The escalation by U.S. troops and the Iran-backed militias is putting Iraq at risk of an all-out military conflict. This trims down the possible scenarios for the U.S. future in Iraq to only 2. All-out war, a departure sooner rather than later. Absent a U.S. threat of invasion, Iran will cease its escalatory actions. Trevino 13. While Iran has supported exporting Islamic revolution and Shia takeover of states, these actions do not create a network of offensive capabilities to become a hegemon. Instead, the focus of the new regime is survival, not expansion. Second is a shift to diplomacy. America's approach to Iran has been overwhelmingly informed by aggression. Jones 11 confirms that the challenge has for too long been treated almost entirely through the lens of security and militarism. Withdrawing troops sends a signal that the U.S. will shift to diplomacy, breaking the cycle of escalation. Harb 19. Peaceful coexistence requires the will to talk and compromise. If either party shows reluctance, the region will continue to live with the possibility of war that could make all past wars look minor in comparison. U.S.-Iran war would be devastating. Chusadovsky 18. It would cause a nuclear holocaust over a large part of the Middle East and Central Asia, involving millions of civilian casualties. Even if nuclear weapons are not used, the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities using conventional weapons would contribute to unleashing a disaster with extensive radioactive fallout. Ready for cross?
Yeah. So on your first contention about Yemen, you read the Parsi evidence that says that U.S. withdrawal led to an 80% decrease in airstrikes. What did the United States do with troops in Syria at the same time?
I'm sure you're going to tell me.
They withdrew them, right? The fact of the matter is that having nearly all of our military presence there in the status quo allows us to do these limited withdrawals, which is what causes Saudi Arabia to go to the negotiating table in the first place.
Wait. why, if the security guarantee is still there and Saudi Arabia sees the security guarantee is still there, then why would minimal withdrawals like
No, because
minimal-
that's exactly our point, right? That bolsters our link story.
Right.
The fact that we still have our wait,
There's a
let me
fraud
finish up. Just let me finish.
response.
The fact that we still have our security guarantee within the region is what allows us to have leverage over Saudi Arabia. Whenever we do these limited withdrawals of our security, that is what pushes Saudi Arabia to the negotiating table. That's what your Parsi evidence concludes.
I would say that the fact that we did that partial withdrawal and still had the troop security within the region and the airstrikes still went down by 80% only magnifies our impact and makes it
no, it
like,
doesn't.
much more likely
It actually proves that we don't have to remove nearly it proves that we don't have to remove nearly all of our military presence to get Saudi Arabia to do things that we want them to do. You can take a question.
Okay, sure. All right, whatever. So let's talk about your Bahrain argument with Shiite uprisings, right? So how many Shiites are living in Bahrain right now?
They have a Shiite majority country. They're just led by the Sunnis.
They have a Shiite majority country. Did you read evidence that says that they have a Shiite majority country?
No, but you can wiki it. Can I have a question?
Okay, sure.
Cool. So on your second contention about nuclear submarines, does the United States have nuclear submarines?
Yeah.
Why hasn't a miscalc happened or an accident?
Because our nuclear submarines aren't in the Strait of Hormuz. Can I ask a question?
Wait, hold up. Why do they have to be in the Strait of Hormuz to have an accident?
Because that's where
like a tidal wave and then explode?
Yeah, because the Strait of Hormuz is, well, the Strait of, first of all, it doesn't, like, you don't have to do sub bumping to have an accident, right? Second of all, we'd say that Iran is much more or much less responsible.
There's tons of other things that could cause nuclear submarine accidents. Like there could be like a massive
You would say like the fact that there are a million countries plus a naval presence in a small region, which is the Strait of Hormuz, increase the probability of accidents, plus the fact that Iran will be a new nuclear.
Wait, we have nuclear submarines in the South China Sea, and there's definitely a ton of concentrated like ships.
South China Sea is much bigger than the Strait of Hormuz. Can I ask you a question?
Sure, go ahead. So
on Saudi Arabia, you say that you want to prevent the next Yemen. Where is the next Yemen?
I don't know. We'll see. Can I have a question?
Wait. If you don't know what your impact scenario is,
no, I can't predict where Iran's going to start its next war. I can just tell you that withdrawing our forces will provoke Iran to start its next.
You don't need to predict specifically where. Can you just give me like maybe like a few options, like a few?
I don't know, like
places.
Maybe Lebanon. I don't know. Can I have a question?
Lebanon. There's already like Hezbollah is already in Lebanon. What do you?
Wait, but that's a terrorist group. That's a terrorist group. They're not like actively. Okay, Lebanon is destabilizing Lebanon to some extent, but I'm talking about them doing like full-out invasions or like starting multiple different proxy conflicts in different areas.
Okay. I guess I do a thank you speech first. So I have a lot of people to thank, so I'll just go down this list that I wrote. Obviously, first thing I want to thank is my parents. Like, they made me food for this tournament, and they also paid the ridiculous expenses of like flying me everywhere. And they also provide like a lot of pretty useful emotional support when we lose, which we do lose sometimes, which sucks. But yeah, I have a lot of appreciation for what they do and how they always support me despite us not always like being the best. So I guess I gotta thank them. Next, I want to thank all of my teammates. Y'all have been super supportive at this tournament. Like, y'all have been helping us prep, and y'all have also done well yourselves. This entire year, I think like Westlake had a massive improvement across the board for all of our teams. And that was definitely not just because of like a few people, that was because of all of y'all's hard work. So like Xiushen, Gunther, Preston, Jaden, like Zane, Ali, Daniel, Caroline, and more of y'all. All of y'all have like worked so hard. And us getting to where we are here is like definitely not all our own work. It's like a small part of all of y'all's work too. Part of that team too, MK and Thomas, thank y'all for all the help with like this tournament as well as the entire year. Y'all have been very useful, and we definitely couldn't make it here without y'all. I also like to thank my previous partners, such as like Nick Ho mainly. I was not very good in my freshman year, so thank you for tolerating me. And thank you for helping me improve. Then there's like a lot of other people that I want to thank. First, notably the children of Arunab. I gotta shout y'all all, Praveen, Vivek, Arunab particularly. We all talked a lot throughout the year, and thanks for like talking me out of like being sad when we would lose rounds at tournaments. Next, FMJ. The conversations in the lab chat were always fun. I like how I like Morgan's conversations a lot. They had a lot of interesting things happening. But like also like Matt, Ryan, Alyssa, and all of y'all, thank y'all for like the support throughout the entire year, not just in the 2 weeks that we spent at NDF, which were also pretty nice 2 weeks. Then the ranch, y'all know who you are, the Kagan Ranch, shout you out. Then there's a bunch of people that have helped us throughout this tournament. So just like maybe getting flows or just like providing emotional support. Andrew, Justin, Sam, Ritvik, Sid, Neil, Jay, all of y'all have been very helpful. And Eli from Bethesda and Alex from Mira Loma have been super helpful, like especially as like rounds started heating up. They've given us a lot of important, like, I guess, advice as we've advanced through elims. Thanks for Jalen for helping me out during state, because I was pretty bummed out, and the no debate movement was kind of funny. But lastly, there's like 3 super important people that I want to talk about in my career. First one is Andrew Lee. Most of y'all might not know who he is, but he's an LDer who's like basically given us all of the weird arguments that we like to run, or at least at the beginning. He like taught us how to run them, and he like gave us a lot of like support, and he's super patient, and he also like responds to my texts at 3 a.m. in the morning, which is pretty outrageous. Like, I don't know how he can stand like my texts, but he does so anyways, and I really want to thank him for getting us to where we are. Next, Mr. Euler, like, there's too many things to say in one speech, but like he kind of does everything for us. Like, he does so much work to get us to tournaments, so much work to manage the team, and he just like truly is the most team player person I know. And lastly, Miles, I kind of do dumb things in rounds sometimes, but I'm really glad that you have been there to like tolerate it, I guess, and help us improve. And I'm really glad that you're here with me as we debate in what's probably going to be the last round of your career. And I hope that this rebuttal doesn't suck as much as most rebuttals do. Speaking of rebuttals, now I have to take prep. Okay, so that was around 15 seconds, so 2:45 remaining. Okay, so the order is going to be just going down the AC. Nothing weird about it. Let me set my timer. Cool. Is there anyone not ready? Let's begin. At the very top, a turn. The Pollock 20 indicates that all of our allies will panic were the US to pull out, which outweighs their entire case on magnitude because every single one of our allies in the region, including Iran and including Saudi Arabia and other countries like that, start multiple conflicts across the entire region, which also includes the conflicts they talk about. You turn it again because Irhan 16 finds that US weakness in the Middle East causes the perception that we're going to be weak across the world, which causes other countries to not trust in our nuclear umbrella and independently proliferate, which increases the chance of conflict because nobody has second strike capabilities. So it increases the chance of conflict across the entire world, which outweighs on scope. Let's get to the particular first contention. 3 turns at the top. The first comes from the Walsh 20 evidence, which indicates that their Parsi evidence shows that we can leverage our military presence to do effective diplomacy. We don't need to do a complete plot. We can still have part of our presence in the area, and we can pull them out to leverage Saudi Arabia to do diplomacy. We don't need to do a whole plot. But second, you turn it again, because Tobin explains that leaving the Houthis just to be in the region by themselves when Saudi Arabia leaves would be comparatively worse because the Houthis would just fight the Yemeni government and cause more damage like they have done so in the past. But lastly, you turn it at the bottom. As Mabon explains that right now, MBS has a lot of domestic pressure on him to appear strong, and Tabati explains that most of his power relies on the U.S. presence. So if the U.S. presence were to disappear, he'd either A, become more desperate, or B, Ravik explains that he'd get overthrown, which increases tension to the region because a bunch of radicals fill in for the Saudi Arabian leadership. But lastly, on the internal link, Lamke finds that there's always an economic incentive for Houthis to continue to fight, and they're going to be like, oh, so the Houthis won't fight once Saudi Arabia has done diplomacy. No, they want to keep receiving aid from other countries, so they'll keep the crisis up. On their second contention, it's going to be analytics. This is a pretty cool argument. First, our presence is always there anyways, so they're always going to have nuclear always going to be building nuclear submarines because insofar as the hardliners in Iran always want to build these nuclear submarines, they're always going to do so. But second, they're building the nuclear submarines right now. There's no reason why they would suddenly stop once the US leaves, insofar as they always have an incentive to project power against Saudi Arabia. But lastly, on the internal link, they don't read a reason why nuclear submarines exploding is just bad for people in general. They just say biodiversity. But Sagoff explains that we can lose 99.9% of our biodiversity and there would be no impact on human life because we rely mainly on a few species that provide us all of our agriculture and stuff like that. So there's no reason biodiversity decreases is bad. But lastly, I don't really understand why the Strait of Hormuz is the only place that we can't have nuclear submarines. If nuclear submarines were going to explode every time they have ships around each other, then they should explode in every single other body of water that they exist in. This argument doesn't really make a ton of sense now that I think about it. On their third contention, on the uniqueness level, the Kiel 20 evidence indicates that COVID-19 has caused both Iran and the US to look inwards instead of looking outwards, which means it actually decreases the chance of conflict. So don't let them tell you that now is the specific brink. But in the long term, the Economic Times 20 finds that Iran's main objective is regime survival. So they do whatever to accomplish that. So whenever they get to the brink of war, they stop before it goes over that brink. That's always what they've always done historically. And they're doing de-escalatory stuff right now, which proves. But Mahoney tells you to weigh this on probability. In 1988 and 2008, they always chosen to scale down and bide their time instead of starting an all-out conflict that would completely destroy the country as a whole. But onto their specific links. On their first link, 2 responses. The first comes from Horowitz. He explains that Iran is a very rational and controlled actor. They're not going to miscalculate. They've never done so in the past, and there's no degree to increase the degree of miscalculation that they tell you about. So there's no really way to terminalize this argument. But second, you turn this because Al explains that the U.S. leaving emboldens Shia loyalists across the entire region, which strengthens both Iranian expansionism as well as, like, I guess, Shia loyalists across the rest of the region, which makes things more unstable, which means that you increase the chance that they miscalculate in the world in which you affirm. But on their last link about diplomacy, there's 3 responses. The first comes from Franson, which explains that right now, Iran, whenever they do quote-unquote diplomacy, they also continue to attack other countries, which proves that their diplomacy doesn't actually lead to long-term solvency. They just say that they're going to have some sort of regional agreement, but it doesn't actually manifest. But second, the Reuters evidence indicates that Iran themselves has said we're not going to get rid of these, we're not going to do diplomacy unless the U.S. gets rid of sanctions and rejoins the nuclear deal, as well as a lot of other stuff, such as they themselves tell you about presence. Insofar as the resolution asks us to get rid of nearly all, but not all, there's still going to be presence in the area. Insofar as the resolution doesn't tell us not to get rid of sanctions, there's still going to be that stuff in the area, so they can't go to diplomacy. But at the bottom, you turn it again, because Stason explains that sanctions right now make it harder for Iran to fund both their military as well as proxies. But Polk explains that were the U.S. to pull out of Iraq, they'd be able to invade Iraq, get a ton of money from the oil fields there, and avoid sanctions, which means they have an increased capability to do war in the world in which you affirm.
Okay, I need to see some cards. The last card you guys read, then the turn about, I think it's the second turn about how, like, the nuclear umbrella, and then I think it's that. Actually, no, yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, so I'll send the nuclear umbrella thing first. And then what else did you want? Hello? I think you're muted, Jack.
My bad. Yeah, so nuclear umbrella, and then the last card you read about, like, Iraq invasion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Both of them should be sent. Just tell me when y'all receive them.
Okay. Haven't gotten it yet. Okay, yeah, it just came through. All right, I'll start running prep now. Here, actually pausing prep. 40 seconds used there. Can I also see we can lose 99.9% of our biodiversity?
Oh yeah, Sagoff. Let me get that.
Yes.
Sorry, that's in a separate file, so it might take me a little bit longer to get. Okay, cool. I just emailed it.
Okay. Here, once I pull up my timer, I'll continue running prep. Yeah, all right. I'll continue running prep starting now. All right, 30 more seconds to use, so a minute 20 has been used total. All right, so I'm also going to be giving some thank yous before I give my speech. First off, I'd like to thank the Blake School for this wonderful opportunity and all the support they've given me throughout the entire season. Next, I'd like to thank my parents and my sister for their support, encouragement, flexibility, and pride. I'd also like to thank my fellow teammates who supported me every weekend and my coaches who went out of their way consistently to make sure that we are successful. I owe you guys a whole lot. Also, thank you to my coaches and teammates on Team USA. I love our squad, and I'm very glad that I got to learn from y'all. You've made me a lot better at all sorts of forms of debate through the work we've done. Lastly, Morgan, you're the greatest. This year has been insane, and thanks for doing it all with me. All right. So it's going to be, just our case, their case. All right. Is everyone ready? Start on Allied panic. He concedes the Parsi empiric. We say that when we limit capabilities, that cause Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Iran to negotiate. Prefer this warranting because we say that yes, allies feel threatened, but their response is diplomacy. Parsi outweighs his turn because they turn to diplomacy. He looks at the real empiric. That's how you evaluate the warranted debate. Then he says that nuclear umbrella goes away. Firstly, I'll respond to impact D to general nuclearization on their case. Secondly, no clarity of impact with other countries. Thirdly, that evidence assumes it's happening in the status quo. The own evidence not unique itself. Then the first thing they say is we can do a partial withdrawal that prevents this from happening. Just because we can doesn't mean we will. Then it's good to have a counterplan. Then they said that you can turn it and the Houthis will keep fighting. And then the next turn also says that Saudis become more extreme. For both of this, Lang explains that if we can prove that Saudi Arabia does turn to diplomacy, what ultimately happens is a power sharing agreement which incorporates all sides and leads to total solvency. Then they say that then on this U.S. presence leads to them being overthrown. Firstly, this should have happened already if it was true that we were also withdrawing troops. And secondly, it was never implicated. Also, Houthis want peace; they won't be hyper aggressive. Then on the second contention about subs, prefer our evidence over his analytics. O'Connor 19 is fantastic. He explains Iran views they're most vulnerable in this region, and specifically it is U.S. ships off this region that are causing the risk of this escalation. Prefer that over his empirics. The only thing he says is two things. First, he says why no accidents yet? It's because they're developing capabilities right now. That's the O'Connor evidence. Second thing he says is that we could lose 99.9% of our biodiversity. That's a random assertion. It doesn't interact what happens in this region. We say the collapse happens and human extinction still occurs. On the third contention, group his first three responses, the Abood evidence as of April postdates all of it and indicates that right now in Iraq there's escalation happening because of Iranian military presence, and there is direct proxy conflict between Iran and America. Then he says that Iran is rational. Yes, they are, and that's why they know U.S. presence in Iraq is an existential threat. Then he says turn it because you embolden it. Firstly, they don't give a warrant for why she is going to embolden. Secondly, that's just their case. I'll get to that when I get to their case. Then we'll concede diplomacy doesn't work because of no U.S. presence. On the last turn, three responses. Firstly, they give no warrant for why Iran, or they don't explain how much more money Iran gets from invading Iraq. Secondly, they could get money from other sources. And thirdly, again, it's just the general emboldening Iran to be able to do that on their case. So let's go to their case. On the Israel scenario, first turn, U.S. presence emboldens Hezbollah. Quran 20 explains that Hezbollah vowed to end the U.S. military's presence in the Middle East, saying U.S. bases were all targets following the killings of Soleimani. Second turn, the affirmative solves better. Tisdall 2020 explains that U.S. regional troop drawdown would almost certainly be accompanied by a mutual defense treaty. Israel supporters in Congress would ensure the country was not abandoned. This requires no presence because it's just a treaty, which means we solve better. It also means Israel doesn't need to escalate because their safety is guaranteed in our world. Also, literally all their evidence is from like pro-Israel think tanks. That means way our turns over their case. On Bahrain. First turn, military support emboldened Saudi Arabia to invade smaller neighbors. Bosnia 17 explains that Trump's unequivocal support has emboldened a newly assertive Saudi Arabia. Thanks to Trump, Saudi Arabia can force its smaller neighbors into submission. That outweighs because multiple countries get invaded because and that includes Qatar and Bahrain. Second, group all their warrants. They assume the U.S. is trying to deter, delink them. Delaney 16 explains that Western countries sought to promote a political reconciliation between Bahrain's regime and the Shia population, but they abandoned those efforts because of the rise of ISIS. Third, the Tyndall 13 evidence is fantastic. It explains Iran is a defensive realist. This also applies to the terms they read on our case. This means that even if we withdraw our presence, all Iran seeks to do is protect its own borders. It will not escalate in response. That's the internal link into basically their whole case. On to Saudi Arabia, on subpoint A. First, they have no clarity of impact. They can't say where or when the next war is. Secondly, the ceasefire is failing. TRT of April 16th explains that Houthis violated the ceasefire 240 times. The TRT explains non-compliance stems from Saudi refusal to make concessions and accept Houthi demands, also making Saudi Arabia willing to negotiate as key to solving a problem. Third, Jones explains that when the U.S. military encircles Iran, it forces them to escalate as they view it to be no other option. That turns both links. Then on subpoint B, the first response comes from Esfandiary, who explains that Saudi Arabia can't nuclearize by themselves for two reasons. First, they have no technological capability; they're decades away, and secondly, they fear allied backlash. He continues, regional nations can't sell Saudi weapons because of massive retaliation. However, secondly, turn the argument, because the only way Saudi Arabia can nuclearize is with U.S. influence. Christopher 19 explains that the U.S. is using its influence in the region to sell Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons. The only risk of this scenario happens is if you fuck that.
Can I see the U.S. as selling Saudi Arabia nuclear weapons?
Yes.
Miles, do you need anything?
No, I should be good.
Are you sure?
I probably will call for stuff during prep, but for now I'm good.
Yeah.
All right. Ready for Charles?
Yeah, sure.
All right, you can have the first question.
Okay, so I haven't received the evidence yet. Maybe that might clarify things up, but why would the U.S. sell Saudi Arabia a nuclear weapon?
So it's basically Trump's political strategy, right? His whole approach to alliances is we don't want to basically be expending our own resources to care for them. That he wants self-sufficiently. That self-sufficiency.
So
that's why he's
why
asking NATO
so
member
why does
states.
he-
If I could.
Why
finish
doesn't he give?
real quick.
Okay, so
This
he's
is
asking.
actually a really useful.
He's
empiric,
asking.
though.
He's
I'd like
asking.
to finish the
So
empiric.
he's asking NATO whether they're willing to give Saudi Arabia nukes. The important question is, have they?
What?
Have
Wait,
they?
what?
So is Saudi Arabia in possession?
Who said
of
he was
nukes?
asking NATO?
You
Wait,
just
no,
did.
hold on.
Okay, then
No,
let me
no,
ask.
no,
Let me
you
ask you a
totally
more.
misunderstood the
Let
argument.
me ask you
Hey,
a
Jason,
more.
let me explain because you never let me finish my initial response.
Sure,
okay?
sure.
So I'm saying it is analogous to the situation where Trump asks NATO member countries to increase their own security commitments while he decreases, or not even decreases, just on face because he thinks we're doing too much for them.
Okay,
It's the same situation with Saudi Arabia.
The straightforward question is: so Saudi Arabia possesses nukes now, right?
No, they're on the path to development thanks to continued U.S. influence.
Oh, so we're not selling them nukes; we're selling them like nuclear technology.
Right, that is going to give them nukes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
We're
Sorry.
not handing them a nuke. No one.
I thought
that.
from what you said in your response, it was they're selling nukes. So I thought I could hold it verbatim. But you can have.
Well,
a question.
yeah, the evidence is actually pretty explicit. It's that
I'm sure it is.
The sales put the kingdom on track to develop nukes. So.
You can have.
I'd like a question though.
Sure,
so
where?
let's talk about your first contention. So specifically on Hezbollah.
Okay.
So how much of a change in the frequency of Hezbollah strikes is needed to trigger the impact scenario? Because they're happening right now.
We say an increase in the rate increases the chance of conflict. Like I don't know, like 5,
how
10,
much?
10 conflict. I don't know. Like you're asking
No,
me to
I'm not
quantify
asking
things
the
that cannot be
impact.
quantified. Like there's
No.
no one
missing
think tank that says like, oh, it would take 3.5 strikes to trigger war, right? Like
so
there's
you're missing the point. You're missing the point. What is the brink? Because the amount of attacks fluctuate from week to week.
I could
asking
ask
how do we know any
I could ask
fluctuation
you
causes
what is
war?
the brink on all of your arguments. I could be like, how many nuclear submarines do
I
they
could
need?
answer
How many?
them.
Okay, so how many times do nuclear submarines have to be built to like, I guess, trigger a like complete collapse of like the Earth's like ecosphere?
It's not the amount of times they're building new nuclear
So just like the
submarines.
moment they build the nuclear submarine, the Earth just collapses.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay,
No,
cool.
I'm just kidding.
Thanks, Jack.
The argument is this. It's O'Connor as of 2020 says very recently what Iran is doing is they're venturing into using these nuclear submarines. So that's why it hasn't occurred yet, right? It's like a recent development.
Yeah, but what's the brink? The brink is like they immediately they
the brink is when they start to
they
deploy
nail
them.
in the last nail and then the earth falls apart, or like they start deploying.
So you're also missing the point here. The brink is that as they start to deploy them, the risk of a miscalculation becomes completely inevitable. So yeah, it's a miscalc arc. Your first argument is not a miscalc arc. So you do kind of actually need to have a brink.
Okay, cool. That makes sense.
How much time do we have left? I messed up my timer.
I've taken 120. So wait, isn't it our speech?
No, I mean in cross.
No, cross is over.
Oh, it is. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I will take prep with my partner.
Jason, can you mute yourself on the call?
Hey, how much prep do y'all have left?
30 seconds.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's going to be their case, then our case, then doing some weighing. Cool. Is anybody not ready? There is one word in your RFD and it's Walsh. They extend the empiric that says that after Saudi Arabia, after there's a pull-up from the United States, there's an 80% decrease in airstrikes. Here's the thing. They can see that the reason why there was an 80% decrease in airstrikes is because the United States did a limited pull-up from Syria. The only way we can do these limited pull-ups to actually push Saudi Arabia to the negotiating tables by having U.S. military presence. Because once that bargaining chip is gone, because the United States has completely left the region, that is what emboldens Saudi Arabia to actually start conflicts in the first place, which means we get clean access to this turn. This outweighs them because we co-opt their empiric, and also if Saudi Arabia were to start this war, then it would cause regional instability, which would spill over into other conflicts, which means we outweigh. But even then, extend the Lamkey evidence, which says, extend the Lamkey evidence, which says that the Houthis always have an economic incentive to fight. So even if they do win their Yemen scenario, they're still not going to win any solvency because the Houthis always have an economic incentive to continue the fight. On their second contention about nuclear submarines, it's an absolutely terrible argument. The Sagoff argument, the Sagoff terminal defense goes unresponded to. They say it's a random assertion. No, Sagoff says that every single, almost every single species does not like actually help out the United States in the first place, which is why he concludes that 99.9% of all species go extinct and nothing would happen. But second of all, the other piece of terminal defense that they drop is that the United States also has nuclear submarines within like areas of close conflict, such as the South China Sea, yet we haven't seen an explosion, so they have no probability on this argument. Let's go to their third contention about US-Iran war. Here's how you weigh this argument. You weigh it on probability, because the Mahone evidence indicates that the past 4 times that war is about to happen, Iran always scaled down. The reason why is Iran is a rational actor. They obviously don't want to get destroyed. What they're going to say is that now is a unique bright line. Remember, there were 4 times in the past where there was unique bright lines, but they always scaled down. They know their regime stability is the most important, so they're never going to start a conflict. You don't give them offense. Let's go to our case. On our first contention about Israel, it's really clean. They read 2 turns. The first turn says that U.S. presence has increased Hezbollah. Empirics disprove. Khalifah finds that right now Hezbollah is actually decreasing the status quo because the assassination of Soleimani caused them to lose legitimacy. On their second turn, they say the mutually defense treaty solves back. They don't prove any war as to why it solves better than U.S. presence. That's where you can extend our second link about panic. The Pollock evidence says that without the U.S. in the region, Israel will become more aggressive. And they would increase retaliation in Iraq. That's crucial because our Laban evidence says that would cause Aharon evidence says that would cause a war, which would ultimately escalate into nuclear war, which causes extinction. This outweighs their case in 2 ways. The first is on time frame, because whenever the United States leaves the region, the perception that the United States has abandoned them triggers immediately, whereas their scenarios take a long time. But the second way is on a prereq. Whenever the perception happens, whenever Israel starts this nuclear war, it destroys all stability within the region, which means that they can't get access, and it also bolsters their war scenarios and causes war. On to our second contention. They read this turn from the Bossi thing that says Saudi Arabia would invade Bahrain. There's no incentive because the MEPC finds that right now Iran has avoided conflict within the region. On their thing about Iran is defensive only. 2 responses. First of all, Iran funds terrorist groups. Clearly, they're not defensive. But second of all, and also there's no way to isolate whether or not Iran's a defensive power. We would say they're escalatory insofar as there's no way to like find who like recently started a conflict. Onto our third contention about Prolif. Cross apply the second war on terminal defense as to why the U.S. couldn't get why Saudi Arabia.
Okay.
We need the
Morgan, do you want to call?
the Mahone?
Oh yeah, that's right. We're doing some cards. Yeah, the card on like all the other times Iran back down.
Okay, I just sent the evidence.
Okay. Morgan, do you want to call me? We'll start prep now. Wait, shoot.
I have that. Y'all are out. Y'all took a minute.
Now this is having about 15 seconds left.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Okay.
Have fun with them.
Morgan, you want to keep going? All right. All right, that's perfect.
Is everyone ready? All right. Starts on my case. It's going to be briefly on the wall, Sharon, and then I'll signpost from there. Is everyone ready? Okay. Start on the wash turn. In order for them to get offense on like negotiations and diplomacy in the status quo, they need to prove uniqueness that negotiations in the status quo are actually working in the diplomacy of solving conflict. Clearly not, because all the ceasefires have been violated in Yemen. The war in Yemen is literally still going. If they don't prove that diplomacy is solving the status quo, that means they don't that they don't get access to it, even if they have it. We would say that the best way to cause like real diplomacy, because the U.S. like partial withdrawal is not enough, is to do a full withdrawal to completely call Saudi Arabia on their bluff. There's no offense up here whatsoever. They need to prove that the diplomacy through the leverage is actually solving any problems in the status quo. They read no impact to ceasefires in Yemen. So let's talk about our contention 3, which is what we're going to go for. The Rebuttal evidence is really, really clear. It says that because Iran sees the United States presence in Iraq on their border as an existential threat, they will do literally, the card says, anything they possibly can to expel U.S. troops from the Iran, expel the troops from Iraq. The Rebuttal evidence says that will lead to a proxy conflict in Iraq, which eventually escalates to war between the U.S. and Iran. The TOC evidence says that will lead to a nuclear strike. That their own case says nuclear war leads to extinction. The only response they have is that with this Maloney evidence, it says that the past 4 times they backed down. 4 responses. 1, we post-date the situation is definitely much different now given the recent escalation with Soleimani. Second, we would say that the trajectory makes conflict inevitable, even if it's not happening immediately right now, or even if the next small skirmish isn't going to do anything. The Rebuttal evidence still proves the trajectory. But third, we would say that evidence says that Iran is geared towards self-preservation. We would say that them escalating to get the United States out of the region is them taking an act of self-preservation, because they believe that the U.S. that the self-preservation is not going to happen so far as the U.S. is in the region. But fourth, that evidence it's terrible. It gives literally no actual examples like they said it does. Let's weigh it in 2 ways. First is the time frame. The Rebuttal evidence says that this is literally about to happen. Second is on strength of link. Their link into their case is a perception link. Perception is entirely subjective. This is not subjective. Let's go to their case. Extend first the Tisdall evidence. They really mishandled the Tisdall evidence. Says that in place of the United States physical military presence, they would sign a defense agreement with Israel, meaning that A, it extends the nuclear umbrella to Israel, and B, saying that the United States would redeploy to defend Israel. They respond by saying that we don't prove that it's no better solvency. We don't have to prove that it's better solvency. We have to prove that it is enough solvency. So far as Israel still has a security guarantee, that severs their link into Israel being aggressive. Next, let's extend the response that says that Iran is not going to be aggressive with Hezbollah because they are defensive realists. They respond with two warrants. One, they say that they're funding terrorist groups. They're funding terrorist groups to hit back against the United States. Once the United States is gone, there's no need to fund terrorist groups. But second, they say that there's no way to isolate. There definitely is a way to isolate. You can look at all the different reasons and scenarios where Iran has lashed out, and has all been in the case against the United States. The tribunal evidence is fantastic. So far as that's true, Iran is not expanding with Hezbollah because they don't see that the United States or the West is a threat in the region anymore. And B, Israel is not going to expand because the Tisdall evidence means that they sign a mutual defense treaty. There's very little probability of this impact. Next on their time frame weighing, it doesn't make any sense. They don't prove why it's happening sooner. But second is on the prerequisite. We would say we both link into conflict. Conflict triggers conflict. It works the other way with ours too.
Can I take the first question?
Yeah.
So if our Israel scenario is contingent upon Israel starting the conflict, not Iran, does your defense that you read about Iran being a defensive power only apply?
Yes, it does apply, because the internal reasoning you say as to why they start the conflict is because Iran funds Hezbollah. We say the root cause of this foreign policy adventurism is U.S. presence because they're defensive realists.
That's our third link. We're talking about our second link. Our second link says that absent the United States, Israel would panic and start a conflict, not Iran.
Yeah, no, I fully understand. They start a conflict with Iran because there is current escalation. That's what your card says.
The fact that Iran
you're not answering my question. The root question, though. My root question is: does your defense?
Wait, hold on. Here's the other thing, though. If we turn your third link, you still access your impact.
Wait, what?
The fact that Iran is a defensive realist and won't expand post-AF means that Israel has no reason to feel threatened by Iran. Because
Wait, hold up. First of all,
Israel has no reason to feel threatened.
The way that perception
First of all,
boils
that's
down in
true,
this
but
room.
also it's about Israel's perception. Even if they think that, even if Iran's trajectory is to not expand in a post-US world, Israel is still terrified of Iran. That's what triggers our link scenario.
But as soon as the AF happens, unless Israel like strikes Iran like the day after we remove.
I mean,
military-
that's the way the argument works.
Like,
yeah, but does your evidence say that though? Does your card say that?
It says
where in the card does it say the day after they strike?
Well, no, it doesn't say that.
I looked at the evidence.
It's kind of wild while you're indicting our evidence in Grand Cross. But second of all, I would
No. I'm saying there's no warrant for your time frame away.
We're indicting.
I do give you the warrant. The perception triggers immediately.
So, but again, you don't read evidence or any explanation as to why.
I mean, you don't contest that.
Evidence.
Yeah, like we make the claim that time frame triggers
have
immediately.
Hold on.
Okay, so I'm looking at my flow right now. Our time frame says perception triggers immediately, and then you just go like, no.
Yeah. You need to have evidence that explains that right after they pull out, Israel strikes. Because just saying perception triggers immediately does not.
If you want to do an evidence indict in second final, that's fine. But
wait, how is this an evidence indict? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you can't just say that when perception exists, there is immediately a war. Guys, you're not letting me finish.
I don't know if we're getting anywhere right now.
No, we're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, y'all aren't letting me finish, but you can have a question.
You can finish.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that yes, it might be true as a matter of concept that perceptions change immediately, but you don't read evidence saying that Israel then can mobilize its forces, can do this attack, or that there are like political forces that would like respond to this perception. There needs to be more work done.
Yeah. I didn't hear any of that defense in any other speech besides in Grand Cross, but that's fine. Y'all can take a question.
The defense was there was no warrant, and I'm saying why it matters, but that's fine.
Read no warrant, but that's fine.
Sure. So let's talk about the defense treaty, right? So far as we agree, the United States would sign a defense treaty with Israel, right? What more does the United States have to commit to doing in order to provide, or in order for Israel to feel secure? So long as the United States security agreement says that the U.S. will extend their nuclear umbrella and also would redeploy to defend Israel in the event of attack.
Here's the thing, that still doesn't interact with our warrant, right? Because Pollock says that even whenever the United States withdraws, Israel would still be scared. And the reason why is because we maintain forces in Iraq that make Israel feel more secure. A mutual defense treaty where there's no like actual backing to the treaty doesn't matter.
But you don't explain why there is a difference between the forces in Iraq and the ability to redeploy, right? The link into the like your perception.
Why would we need redeployment if we just have them there in the first place? Like, I'd feel more secure if it was just there than if it's like, okay, we'll be here in a little bit if something bad happens.
But like the time frame of like the United States taking like 3 days rather than 4 days to respond is definitely not enough to trigger the bright line between attacking.
I mean, mobilizing all the troops takes a little bit of time.
The United States taking a little bit extra time to mobilize their troops isn't going to be the difference maker as to whether or not Israel like starts a full-scale war with Iran.
Wait, what?
Huh? Sorry, you kind of just.
I think that's time, by the way.
Cool. We have 30 seconds left. We'll take it. Okay, so we're out of time. It's going to start with their case and then back to our case, and then it's going to be on the weighing that my partner presented in summary. Yeah. So is there anyone not ready? The Wallstrom gives us a way to win. It tells you that we can leverage our limited presence in order to solve for conflict. They themselves tell you that it decreased the conflict by 80%, which means this is one way in which we can already win the round if nothing else happens. On their third contention, they mishandled the Maloney evidence in the past in 1988, 2008, and now in 2020, they've always backed down. They make 4 responses. The first is about Soleimani. No, our economic times evidence already indicates that Soleimani was accounted for, and still there was no escalation. Next, they say that it takes time, but they're in the trajectory. This loses them the round, but I'll get to that later. Their third and fourth response are just how there's no examples and how it's escalation to self-preservation. No, they don't want to nuke themselves. They don't want to immediately lose the regime. And also, we have examples. We literally read all of them. On their weighing, their strength of link weighing is about perception. Their own case is also about perception. I don't get why they read it. On the time frame weighing, I'll respond to that later, but they don't read a warrant on why it happens immediately. On our case, the round breaks down simply. They extend one thing about the defensive agreement. First, Morgan does not extend a warrant in summary for why they suddenly give a security agreement to Israel, which means that you cannot evaluate it when Jack extends it in second final. But second, our time frame weighing takes care of this. Perception triggers immediately, while the defense agreement takes months or years to negotiate, which means that the perception triggers, which destroys the defense agreement because everything's turned into conflict already. But lastly, it does not interact with our warrant, just like my partner told you. In the past, like, even if we move our troops out, a piece of paper is not going to make them feel better. Let's get to the link chain. Right now, Pollock explains that Israel doesn't feel very aggressive, but that changes when they have the perception of the U.S. leaving, which means that they want to counter Iran more, which means they start the first strike, and Erhan tells you that leads to a nuclear war between Israel and Iran, which Star 14 tells you leads to extinction. On the weighing, they could see the second prereq that says that any conflict spills over. So whichever conflict happens first wins the round. This is where their third response about a trajectory on our case loses them the round. We tell you that the perception triggers immediately, while their tensions have to continually build up, and we don't know when that will trigger. Insofar as they don't contest that perception triggers immediately, their responses at the bottom about how Iran is defensive doesn't matter. The moment Israel sees that we leave, they start a nuclear war with Iran. Insofar as they don't contest it, this conflict spills over. It makes their conflict non-unique, and it means that a defense treaty is far too late to stop anything. It's already won in the neg.
Let's go, dude. All right. It's gonna be their case. Yeah, it's gonna be their case, our case, Wang. All right. Is everyone ready? Start on their case. They cold drop the defensive realist turn and final focus. It automatically loses them the round. What our evidence indicates is Iran is solely defensive realist. The only way in which they expand the root call per our evidence, we read that they totally conceded final focus is U.S. presence. This turns their links in two ways. A, Israel isn't stupid. They know that if Iran also backs down, they don't have to freak out. But B, it turns their third link. And that means that if we turn their third link, even though they didn't try to go for their third link, we still get their impact because we say that there's less funding in there is a drastic decrease in funding for Hezbollah, which means that we solve this conflict too. Again, Morgan implicates this into both the link they go for and also the other link. So we have a clear way that we win their impact. Even if you think they win the wing, we definitely just win the round right there. So let's go on to our case. Start by frontlining this turn he extends. First, there's no implication of it in final focus or extension of the warrant, so you don't weigh it at all. Second, they needed to prove that there was solvency right now with diplomatic negotiations. When we pulled out, that was one example. They don't prove that the impacts that are still happening. Again, they have no impact off of this. They don't cross-apply to anything super weak argument. At that point, extend the link. It's very clear. Abdo explains that Iran made a recent decision that it needs to expel all of the U.S. from Iraq, which is why there is current conflict happening between militias in the status quo, which eventually causes escalation to nuclear war. The one response they extend is just like Mahone all other times. Call for the card. It doesn't analyze a single other example. Moreover, Abdo is still better because it postdates from April. They concede that. Now onto the wing, which we're also winning, even though we don't have to because they dropped that turn on their case. First, on the perception, they drop this weighing in final focus. All he says is your argument relies on perception too. No, it doesn't. Our argument relies on actual militarized crosses between the U.S. and Iran. What Morgan says is the perception links are systematically weaker because multiple uncontrollable factors influence perception, which means that short circuits their access to the time frame weighing, which means they don't access it. Secondly, even if you do look at time frame, for our time frame weighing, the Abdo evidence explains that we're on the brink right now. They have no evidence saying that the entire Israeli military could mobilize as soon as you vote for them to then cause the strike. That was a link chain they needed to make, they needed to prove, they never did.
Next round.
You're on.
Hey Blake, can I see Tisdale or is it already in the chain?
I believe it is already in the chain.
Which
Let
card?
me make sure. Tisdale, right? Is that in the? No, it isn't actually. Yeah, let me send
Yeah,
that.
send Tisdale.
Wait, yeah, just to clarify, that's you wanted the mutual defense treaty. That's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and the stuff highlighted in yellow is what I read in rebuttal.
Okay, we have a decision. Is Blake here?
Let me get Jason back. Jason, do you have a
Yeah.
decision?
Cool. I do just want to say something before we announce the decision really quickly. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that for the second year in a row, there were no gender minorities competing after octos in this tournament. And that this is the result of systemic sexism that exists at every level in this activity and won't be addressed without systemic changes. Well, without those, it'll only continue to repeat itself. Some examples of those changes might look like teams hiring gender minorities as head and assistant coaches and putting gender minorities in positions of leadership on their teams. And at the tournament level, tournaments need to ensure that gender minorities are judging out rounds in meaningful numbers and provide implicit bias training to their judges. As a whole, the community needs to call out sexist and exclusionary behavior when it happens in and out of round, starting with taking the huge numbers of sexual predators out of positions of power at schools and at camps. I have a lot of love for this community. I think this round only exemplified that, but we can and absolutely must do better. So with that said, congratulations to both teams to making it this far. This is a huge accomplishment. Congratulations on your careers to those of you for whom this was your last round. So the decision was a 2-1 for the pro from Blake.
Do you want me to start since I sat? Good, okay. First of all, let me echo the comments that Lizzie made. I think she spoke eloquently, and I'm not sure that anything needs to be added other than this is something we all need to get together, figure out, and fix. So with that in mind, this was a very, very difficult to judge. If I'm looking at the continuum of 0 to 100, neither team got very far away from 50, either above or below, which means in my mind, I had to come to some decision of what happens if we have, in my estimation, a 51% strike by Israel versus a 49% pacifist movement as far as Iran is concerned. At the end, I came down with that situation. I believe the Khan did a better job in winning the Israel strike than the pro did in winning the Iranian strike. And one of the reasons I went there is that when the pro is telling me that Iran will do anything it has to get the United States out, and at the same time tells me that Iran is a defensive realist, both in the same time frame, I'm having trouble reconciling that, and I'm having trouble trying to figure out the prediction of a future Iran. And so that's where I came down to the 51-49 split. The second way, though, that I dealt with this situation is that if I go and I say, okay, it's 50-50 between Israel striking and Iran not doing anything, I look at the other argument that the Khan gave me, which was a uniqueness argument. And I believe that is also another way to go to a pro ballot. So that's how I arrived at my decision.
I can go next, I guess. So for me, the round broke down into 3 places. So first, on the Israel argument, I think that even if I don't think I fully buy the implication of the turn about Iran being defensive realist, because I don't think it's really implicated as a response to the argument about Israel until final focus. But I think that Af is right that the time frame isn't immediate as you make it out to be, and it's unclear why the time frame would be immediate. So it's something that like takes a longer amount of time than you say it will, which mitigates the scenario a lot, and then plays into the weighing, which I'll get to a little bit later. And then secondly, on the Walsh turn, I think this does end up being responsive to the Yemen argument, but I'm not sure it ends up being offense for neg, because in Final Focus, it's just implicated as like in one instance, it decreased 80% of airstrikes, which I don't think is responsive to the arguments that App is making to frontline it, which is that like this is an example where it worked once, but then there were ceasefires are violated all the time. So it's not proof that like the strategy works long term and is something that the US like can effectively rely on. So then looking to the like US-Iran war in Iraq. So I think the uniqueness here is that there's existing tensions in Iraq. And so it's just that it's like whether or not these are likely to escalate if the US were not to withdraw. I think the clash is like whether or not it would escalate as much as Af says, because Neg is arguing that Iran historically backs down before things escalate to that extent. Honestly, I think part of the reason this round was so close was because the warranting, like on the link level responses here, was just not great in the back half. I think Neg is basically just saying like extending Maloney and saying like Iran is not gonna like Iran, this is like against Iran's calculus, and then Af just keeps saying like the evidence postdates and also like is about change calculus after Soleimani. I think Maloney probably means that there won't be a nuclear war, but I don't think it means the conflict doesn't escalate. And I think the like little bit of warranting there is about why the evidence postdating matters and like changes in Iran's calculus does enough for me to believe that there's going to be some conflict. And then I think because like the argument being made by Af is that that conflict is already somewhat happening, it's just a question of escalation. I think that time frame seems sooner to me rather than the Israel time frame. And then I also think because of the strength of link weighing done by Af on perception versus like existing tension on the ground, I agree with them that I don't think their argument is about perception, but yours is. So I think that weighing done is enough, means that the offense won by Af is enough to win them the round.
Yeah, I saw the round very similarly to Lizzie. I think like one thing I just want to say overall is I appreciate that this debate was much closer to like what I view PF as. I think, you know, I don't think that 5 years ago I would have said that agreeing to like, you know, nuclear war would have been PF, but I think that having a warrant debate and having that, you know, that sort of warrant link Wang debate is definitely where, you know, I hope PF stays. So I want to thank you all for, I think, a great final round that displays a lot of that. But yeah, I think like when both teams are basically agreeing on this impact calculus sort of where the end result is in terms of, you know, a war that could go nuclear, I think then I'm left looking at the two scenarios. And I just, you know, I agree with Lizzie on sort of her scenario analysis that she gives. In terms of, you know, I think on the perception argument, I think that the pro's ahead. I also think that the Tisdale evidence is actually really good on this defense agreement. You know, they're extending this in every speech. Like you say, they don't extend a warrant in the summary, but like I think they do. But also, like I think the evidence is really good. For the AF, I would say that like reading the card, I would also spend a little bit more time talking about the fact that the card talks about congressional allies for Israel. And like, that's why, like when the neg starts pressing you on how fast is this agreement going to come, the evidence is very explicit that like, it would be a slam dunk basically because of AIPAC's control of Congress. And so I think you could have like easily made that even clearer in the debate. But I think that, you know, if I'm giving you that defense agreement, I don't see the war with Israel nearly as likely as the conflicts and tensions that are already on the ground. So that's why I affirm. Any questions for any of us?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Great run, you guys.
Congrats, y'all.
Thank you very much.
Great round. Thank you all so much for judging.
All right.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.